When I was asked to do this speech, I wasn't sure how to start. The thing is, I believe so much in people's capacity to change for the better. But one thing I really hate is lying. When the lies start, it's hard because you don't know if change is happening. When the lies start, I would honestly rather reserve my energy for others who are more willing to listen and change. So, why do I say this? I'm sure, as you all know, that there is so much greenwashing, or as a recent Guardian article put it, bullshitting from the private sector. And that makes it so hard to not just run away and decide not to talk to any of you at all. But I know there are different aspects of the private sector, and if I'm right, none of you here are the biggest polluters, and so maybe you can actually be talked to. But I'm not here to mince words. The climate crisis is a symptom of the system that has been built to be unjust, a system founded on oppression and injustice and colonialism and racism and sexism and human pain. And all for what? For profit. For the fantasy of everlasting growth on a planet that has limited resources. And if you think that we're running out of time, you're wrong. We're already out of time. My home, the Philippines, is one of the most vulnerable countries in the world to the climate crisis. In the past 20 years, we have had the highest number of extreme weather events. I'm 23 years old. I was practically born into the climate crisis. Last year, the strongest storm landfall on recorded history hit the Philippines, and barely a week after that, another typhoon poured over a month's worth of rain in under 24 hours. I was on my way home when the typhoon came. I remember my mom called me and she told me, Mitzi, don't come home because the roads to our house are flooded. I had to stay at a friend's place with no electricity for 3 days, not knowing if my mom was okay, if I would have a place to come home to. The floods in my city reached up to the second floor of buildings with over 12 meters or 40 feet high. People were stranded on their rooftops in an effort to survive. This is what it's like to live in the Philippines. Growing up, there were weeks that I had to do my homework by candlelight because of the raging typhoons outside, and I'm already one of the more privileged ones. So many have had it worse than I do. These typhoons have only been getting worse and worse. Growing up, we were frequently visited by the wails of the rushing wind, the heavy footsteps of rain, and the angry banging of thunder. The fear of typhoons and drowning in my own bedroom were constant companions. My climate anxiety, exacerbated by my climate trauma, consumes me. The climate crisis is here. We're already going through hell, and things will only get exponentially worse as business as usual practices continue and key players keep spewing out empty rhetoric and false promises. I have run out of words. I don't know how to stress enough that what we're doing now, especially the private sector and world leaders, is nowhere near enough. So I'll let the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change scientists remind you. Just last week, on the 23rd, some UN draft reports were leaked. What did it say? Species extinction, more widespread disease, unlivable heat, ecosystem collapse, cities menaced by rising seas. These and other devastating climate impacts are accelerating and bound to become painfully obvious before a child born today turns 30. That means less than 30 years from now. I'll let that sink in. Has it sunk in yet? Has it sunk in that major cities across the world will sink? That people will drown in floods even more than they already have today? On one side of the planet, you have people drowning from floods. On the other side of the planet, you have people dying of thirst. We need you to prioritize the people and the planet over profit. And I know some of you say you already do, but we need more, and we need you to help pressure the other private sectors, especially the biggest polluters, to do the same. When I say we, I don't just mean people from the Philippines or the global south, not just our generation of youth, but humanity, which you are part of. The richest elite have a debt to pay for the climate crisis that is happening to us. And when we are talking about climate action and justice, it means recognizing that countries and people least responsible for the crisis are the ones most impacted. So check your supply and distribution chains. Beyond sustainability, look at the rights of your workers and your partners' workers. Look at the brutality of how the materials are being extracted from our lands here in the global south for the profit of the global north. I know it's difficult, but I did say that the system was built to be unjust. And all this to say that, again, I'm assuming that none of you here are fossil fuel industries and non-essential plastic industries, because for those guys, my message is a lot clearer and more concise, and really it's just end the business. But for everyone else, remember that you changing your sustainability policies, the corporate social responsibility projects, the outreaches, the donations, the tree plantings, that won't solve the climate crisis. So now I'm not talking to you guys as members of the business community anymore. I'm talking to you guys as members of humanity. Join us. You need to join the people on the streets for systemic change. We need to come together and unite to get world leaders, especially from the global north, to put policies in place to stop emitting without leaving our workers and marginalized peoples behind. If you think that is too radical, let me remind you how I started this. I don't like lying, so here is the brutal, honest truth. If you think that is too radical, let me ask you, is it too radical to fight for a future worth living? Remember when the scientists just said, before a child today turns 30 years old, I'm not going to compromise and haggle for my life and my future and the lives and futures of future generations. We need change. Will you join us?